Welcome to The Deepest Cut, a podcast about the movement from painful experiences to meaningful music. I'm your host, Matt Connor. Some wounds take years to surface, and even longer to sing about. For the better part of 3 full decades, Chris Rohman and Sanctus Real have been pushing for greater honesty and vulnerability within the world of Christian music. And especially since their release of their single in 2006 entitled I'm Not Alright, Rohman and company have laid bare their own doubts and fears, their sorrow and grief. Not only have fans responded en masse, but Sanctus Real's music helped to expand the entire scope of experiences addressed by other artists, thus creating more points of connection for those who need a lifeline the most. The band formed in Toledo, Ohio in the mid-90s, and since then, Sanctus Real has released 10 studio albums, including 2024's All Along, with 8 number 1 songs and 19 top 10 hits to show for it. Yeah, that's a lot. But after so much longevity and success, Rohman says he's still learning how to be honest in his craft, as newer wounds have surfaced on the road. On this episode of The Deepest Cut, Sanctus Real's Chris Rohman talks about the band's newer single, On the Mend. Written in the aftermath of severe panic attacks on tour that forced him to step away for a month-long sabbatical, the song is a raw and hopeful meditation on breaking down and slowly being put back together. Here's my conversation with Chris Rohman here on The Deepest Cut. Hello and welcome to The Resistance. My name is Matt Connor. I'm your host. Today I have the distinct privilege of sitting across, so to speak, we're digitally sitting across from one another, Chris Rohman from the band Sanctus Real. How are you, by the way? Introduce yourself, say hi, and how you're doing on a day like today.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. It's not often I get to do well-known podcasts, so I'm very grateful to be on.
I'm not sure how well-known this is, but we're glad to have you on.
And I play guitar in the band. For those who aren't familiar with Sanctus Real, we are a band from the 90s, technically speaking. We formed in 1996 as teenagers. And myself and our drummer, Mark, we're still the original members. We're the only original members left after 29 years of making music together as Sanctus Real.
I mean, first of all, obviously we want to get into, this is a podcast about getting into sadder songs, I guess you'd say, difficult lyrical terrain, etc. But you just can't say you've been doing something for nearly, like, next year is 30 years, right? How much reflection is happening within the band, especially with the 2 original members, about that kind of an achievement?
Oh man, we've been thinking about it. It's sneaking up on us, honestly. But we have been thinking about it as we look back at all the songs we've written over the years. And honestly, I kind of mark our career with a few moments that really defined this band. And one of those was, one that I can really pinpoint about how the trajectory of the songs we wrote changed was after a song we wrote, I believe it was 2005 or 6, called I'm Not Alright. And if you look back at that time in our space in Christian music, we had put up 2 records up to that point that were pop rock records. And we were young 20s, putting out music that we hoped sounded like Weezer or the Foo Fighters. And that's kind of what we grew up on. And that's what we were doing in our space. But there was a distinct moment that changed for us in the message that we wanted to be able to express as a band in Christian music when we wrote I'm Not Alright. And that was a real confession. I think at the time, there wasn't anything on Christian radio that spoke to that vulnerability, at least that I knew of, pop rock wise, especially, maybe some of the harder rock stuff. About just that confession of going through something and it's okay to say I'm not all right. And that's going through those things is what leads me to you. And that was a real epiphany for us to actually open up as a band, as guys that grew up together from teenagers on to have that real kind of conversation. Our drummer had experienced the loss of his dad at that time. He lost his dad to cancer, who was young at that time. And we wrote that song, I'm Not All Right, just out of that experience. And that really opened up our songwriting to be more vulnerable from that point forward.
Before that time, had you wanted to be more vulnerable and maybe didn't feel permission to do so? Or was that your real first attempt to even go there?
You know, I would be lying if I said it was our first attempt, but I think the weight of the things that we had dealt with up to that point weren't quite that heavy. I mean, at that time, I think Matt, our singer, would have been newly married. Our drummer had just gotten married. I was probably engaged. So, we had put out a few records before that most of us were still bachelors, just living life on the road, playing 200 plus shows a year, living out of a van. And so the stuff we wrote about up to that point, in our minds might have felt like this is kind of weighty subject matter, but it wasn't quite to that.
Not a lot of like loss, grit, that kind of friction in your life. Let me ask this, because obviously with like a 30 years of experience, you can speak to this better than most.
Yeah.
How has that level of permit? You said, "Hey, there was really nothing like that on radio." Given what you just said, and now the music that you can make now, how much permission is there now? How has that changed over the span of time that you've been in the industry?
Christian music, as a genre has grown so much in that time. And I think we saw a shift for sure from, the mid 2000s on about that vulnerability. I think there was this realization, people want to hear this stuff. People want to, you don't know who's listening to Christian music, and anybody can relate to those feelings though. And I think it was easier before to sugarcoat lyrics for the sake of, commercialism. And I don't know, I guess my perspective on it is that there was a noticeable shift in the songs that were coming out after that point. And I'm not saying it had anything to do with Sanctus Real, but I think it was just, there was a time and a place, and we were blessed to be part of it and in that space and help maybe even usher some of that into our genre.
Obviously decades later now, but we're talking about, the song that was chosen for this was On the Mend. That feels very much still in the vein of what we're talking about. Can you kind of take me into that, and even how that fits within the conversation we've already started to have?
Yeah. So On the Mend, we released that just earlier this year. And I think thematically, it's something that we've talked about or hit on in different ways before, but this was a little more on the nose, I guess, from the get-go in that first verse. More of a confessional kind of conversation again, back to kind of the idea of I'm not all right. And for me, the first line of this song, it was right there for me as soon as we heard this track. A lot of times when we write, either I'm bringing a musical idea, I have a little studio set up, and I always have these little musical nuggets, but we do a lot of co-writing. So when we get with producers, some of these producers will have tracks worked up as well, and they'll play us some and see if there's anything we like. And this was one of those times, it was like at the end of a writing week, and we had kind of exhausted most of our musical ideas we had as a group. And we were working with a brand new producer we hadn't worked with before. His name's Thomas Toner, and he played us a few tracks he had. And this was the third track he played us. And musically speaking, it was just like the simple beat that you hear on the song over the chord progression. And something about it just really spoke to me. And I just almost instantly had this idea for the first line about this open conversation, saying, I thought there was something wrong with me. And I think when you have that moment in a writing room where you have a lyric hit you, you don't always know where it's coming from. It's in there for some reason, and it just comes out. But sometimes when that happens, you feel very strongly about it and don't even know why you feel strongly about it. Like, what are we going to write a song about with the first line that says, I thought there was something wrong with me? And the track, if you hear it, it's kind of like a happier, mid tempo, like has some swagger to it. And sure enough, I blurted that line out. Well, first of all, I said, I love this track. I think this is the track we should write to. And then I blurted that line out. And our singer, Dustin, who it's usually Dustin and myself in the room with other co-writers, Dustin was on board and he said, yeah, let's see what this is. And we kind of quickly formulated the verse before we even got to the chorus, which a lot of times it's the opposite. And as it kind of came together, I realized what it was inside of me that kind of needed to come out. And that's where you get more of the verse talking about alluding to, like, I've tried things talking through with a counselor. I put in the work. I talked to myself. I checked all the boxes, but it still didn't help. And I think there's a vulnerability in saying that for me, like, as someone who went through a somewhat unexplainable, I guess, traumatic experience a few years ago where I found myself in an emergency room suffering from a panic attack on the road with the guys in the band. And it was something that I'd never, ever experienced before in my life and didn't know where it came from. It literally came out of nowhere. But that started a season for me of having to deal with stuff that was in there that I didn't know. And that's kind of, I think, obviously where this lyric was hiding. And it came out in the room that day.
So that panic attack was sort of the place here, because even like midway through the song, you're talking about it says like, in all the deep hurts and deep wounds, in time they led me to you, just you, right? So there's like plural things there. I didn't know if there was a season in which multiple things were going on, or in your head if you were like kind of referencing some more specifics.
Yeah. I think it was, that speaks to, for me, just that process as I remembered back to talking to my counselor and realizing, like, there's stuff here that I didn't know was here, that I think a lot of people who go through counseling, that's the experience. But I think the straight up things that were easier to pinpoint right out of the gate was, as we've already said, we've been a band now for almost 30 years. And about 10 years ago, there was a major change in our band. Our original lead singer stepped out of the band, and that was a really difficult season for us. It was a difficult season for him, a difficult decision to make. A whole lot of uncertainty followed in that season. But I look back at how that all transpired, and it's kind of funny because now, even at shows, and I don't know why it is this way, but Dustin from stage, as he introduces us all, he'll kind of give me, I become the one who gets quote unquote credit for carrying the band forward through that season. I think because he calls me like the band's driving force. And I appreciate him saying all these things, and when I look back at that season, I say, well, it was nothing but the grace of God who allowed me to be naive enough that this whole thing could work again. It's like we were a band that had a career arc at that point. I think we had put out 6-7 records maybe for Sparrow, which was like the label we first signed to when I was 21. And so anybody could look at what we had done and think, okay, those guys did it. They had a good career. We were definitely on the way down. It's time to close shop. And so be it. So for me, when Matt came to us and said that he just felt like it was time for him to be done, but if we wanted to continue, we could, I really didn't even hesitate. It was kind of this thing I still can't explain, other than I felt strongly that there were still songs to write. God had given us a platform as a band for whatever reason, all those years, that I felt still had a purpose. And I just deep down didn't think it could be done. I don't even think it was out of denial. I just really felt like I was so passionate about these kinds of songs we were able and capable of writing that surely there had to be more work to be done. And so I just kind of jumped into it. But another thing that Dustin will say from stage is, like, part of our story of finding him was that I didn't believe that we should go about it in a way that was conventional, as in having tryouts or having an audition or putting the word out in some kind of American Idol-esque way, which was some of the advice I was given at the time from people in the industry.
Oh, what were you picturing?
I thought, the whole way this band started was just a bunch of friends in high school, a small Christian high school that started writing music together because we liked playing music together. It's like I knew it had to be an organic thing. Whoever we found would have to be called to this. It couldn't be somebody that just fit a description and could make it work financially or any of these things, because there was so much yet to be determined. Too many things were hanging out there that I couldn't explain or tell somebody. There's no concrete, like, if you put this in, it will work. It was all a matter of somebody really had to feel like this was their calling to join a band that had a mission. And that mission was to proclaim the gospel, even if there was no guarantee that it was going to work. And that's what we found in Dustin. And I'll say that we didn't put the word out. We didn't know Dustin before, and it just happened in such a God way, where he came into the fold, and it was very obvious to me that this is the guy that God has brought into our lives. And I felt comfortable moving forward at that point with him, because I felt like I wasn't the one asking this of somebody or putting it on somebody, because that's too much weight. Like, who am I to be able to ask somebody to, step down from a position you have at church and to move into all this uncertainty with a family, and it's going to work, I promise. It's like I'm not a salesman, and I was not going to be that to a guy who was going to step into this position. So, when I had my big breakdown moment, my big panic attack moment, it was at a show on the road. And once I kind of could get my bearings, I had to come off the road for about a month straight. I was drained. Like, it was 2 episodes that happened on the road, and it got me to a point where I couldn't think straight. Everything, light bothered me, sound bothered me. Like, I was a wreck. And I came off the road, and that's when I started seeing a counselor and getting tested for all kinds of stuff too. That's when it became evident that the weight that I had carried, and maybe even some of the guilt I was carrying, because the band had become successful again. I think I know there was a part of me that almost felt like bad about that, because everybody was saying, well, this isn't going to work. You shouldn't even try it. But yet it worked. And, and so I almost was like, it might sound weird to feel guilty about that, but, when I look back at that, and I'm still friends with our previous lead singer, but, early on, that was a contentious time. It was almost like two boats, that had been traveling together for so long, just split up, but we're still moving forward. And that to me was like, I almost, even in that season, like, I felt like I couldn't be as happy as maybe I could have or should have been, because it was like, oh, but don't gloat about any of this stuff that's happening. But yet I was watching all this cool stuff that only God really could have done coming to be in my life. And I was just carrying it in such a way that was like shameful almost. And that's what came out.
It's almost like you needed permission. I mean, you mentioned permission to be vulnerable before 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's almost like you needed another level of permission there too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was talked about. Like, I needed some kind of a release from that way of thinking, and from feeling like tied to somebody else's emotions, absolutely. So that whole process began a really deep healing for me. That was a big part of it, a huge part of it, just that relationship, that dynamic, that time in my life of the band, walking the band through that transition. But then, other stuff came up in those counseling sessions that was even deeper, probably. Well, they were, that we hit on, that maybe I still didn't even get complete resolution from, but I became aware of them at least. And that awareness really helped me and helped shaped how I dealt with the anxiety and the feelings that were now at the surface that I had to be dealt with. And that kind of speaks to the other lyrics in this song, and hopefully that other people can relate to too. Just those experiences of being burned by somebody, of these bad breaks and mistakes and heartaches, relational issues, stuff that we all go through, and we all deal with it in different ways. But for me, it's like I could see a counselor, I could go through these steps, I could make these realizations, but at the end of the day, for me, it turns out it all really just came down to like having a real ongoing relationship with Jesus, my Savior. It wasn't anything that my counselor was going to be able to tell me that was going to instantly make me feel like, okay, I have an understanding of this now. Let's move forward. It's like, okay, now I have these nuggets of maybe these truths that I wasn't aware of before, but the only person who can actually make me feel whole, who makes me whole, is Jesus. It's still only Jesus. And I'm thankful that I had that experience where I was given an opportunity to deal with a lot of this deeper stuff that up to that point I wasn't completely even aware of. But to walk out of it knowing that the only way that I can still experience grace and peace and healing after all that is because of what Jesus has done for me. And that's this song, I guess, in a nutshell, is that it is a process. It's not like, oh, now I'm still okay. Now I'm totally good because I have that realization. It's like, no, I'm at this point in my life where I'm going to be dealing with these kinds of thoughts, and I'm going to be more aware of these things. And it's going to be a process for me to surrender those things on a daily basis. And that's the beautiful thing about what Jesus does for us, what the Holy Spirit does for us. The way that he speaks to us on a daily basis and renews us each day is all part of that healing process.
Which is even reflected in that title of On the Mend, which implies I'm not there yet. It's in that in between, and yet hopeful in its direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what we want people to grasp with a song like this, and with a lot of our songs. It's that, sometimes Christian music can get pegged for, putting a bow on the box, and, you have a perfect 3-minute song. Like, I was this and now I'm this. Thank you, God. Like, there's songs that we have that I guess you could put in that category, more or less. But yeah, I think what we try to do as a band is speak to, and songs like this especially, speak to some of those other things that, scratch a little deeper than the surface, and offer hope to those who are actually going through stuff.
Tell a fuller part of the story.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, I'd love to have you, let's play the song. Why don't you take us into it?
Yeah. I appreciate you all giving us an opportunity to share this song with your listeners. It's very dear to our heart. We've actually been playing this song live lately, just started playing it live, and I love it. It's a fun track with some lyrics that I hope you guys will appreciate and might offer you a little bit of hope. This song is called On the Mend.
I thought there was something wrong with me. I did my best, tried everything that my counselor said. I put in the work, talked to myself, checked all the boxes, all of the steps. Still didn't help. And after headaches and bad breaks and mistakes and heartaches, when you came, it changed. And all the deep hurts and deep wounds, in time they led me to you, just you. And this is my heart on the mend, my spirit becoming whole again. This is where dreams began, a fire burning deep within. I'm spiraling down to a love I found. Though I'm far from the end, this light up ahead. I believe my heart is on the mend. You know I do all the things that I do. You know I say all the things that I say. And you know all the pain that I've gone through. And you still tell me I'm okay. And after headaches and bad breaks and mistakes and heartaches, when you came, it changed. And all the deep hurts and deep wounds, in time they led me to you, just you. And this is my heart on the mend. My spirit becoming whole again. This is where dreams begin. A fire burning deep within. I'm spiraling down to a love I found. Though I'm far from the end, this light up ahead. I believe, my heart is on the mend. I'm still holding on to hope. Though this hurt still has a hope. Sometimes miracles are slow. This is my heart on the mend. My spirit becoming whole again. This is my heart on the mend. My spirit becoming whole again. This is where dreams begin. A fire burning deep within. I'm spiraling down to a love I found. Though I'm far from the end, this light up ahead. I believe, my heart is on the mend.
You've been listening to The Deepest Cut, part of the Rabbit Room Podcast Network. Audio production and theme music by Isaac Vining. Logo and identity work by Meg Cook. The Deepest Cut was created and hosted by me, Matt Connor. Thank you so much for listening.